Good afternoon. I'm Ann Harrison, the Dean at Berkeley Haas. Welcome to today's Dean Speaker Series, co-sponsored by the Center for Responsible Business Peterson Speaker Series. I am pleased to introduce today's guest, one of our own, and a graduate of our evening and weekend MBA program, Manish Chandra, founder and CEO of Poshmark. Manish's career began in marketing and product management at Versant, Sybase, and Intel. His experiences there sparked him to found the first social shopping platform, Kaboodle, in 2005, with a focus on fashion, home products, and lifestyle choices for women. As one website describes his role as CEO at Kaboodle, Chandra is the consummate visionary, thinking up about 16 new ideas for Kaboodle a day. In 2011, he decided to carve out a niche of his own with the founding of Poshmark. With a vision to be the go-to place to buy and sell fashion, the goal of Poshmark was a way to, in Manish's own words, democratize style and fashion across a community. Originally founded as a platform exclusively for women and women's fashion, Poshmark has since expanded into men's, children's, home, and pet categories as well, with over 4.5 million active sellers catering to more than 70 million total users. By extending the life cycle of clothing, Poshmark is creating a more sustainable future. You'll hear a lot more about that during today's conversation. Manish, we are extremely proud of your success in questioning the status quo in the online marketplace, and we really look forward to today's discussion. Today's conversation will be led by 4 Haas students who will each introduce themselves. Robert Strand, Executive Director of the Center for Responsible Business, will moderate the discussion. On behalf of all of us here at Berkeley Haas, welcome back, Manish.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to join all of you for the conversation. One of the things that I'm sort of so excited about is that what we are talking about today in so many ways hits the very foundation of what we are doing, which is sustainable future around economic sustainability, social sustainability, and environmental sustainability. And that's a mission and vision we've had from day one. What is amazing about Poshmark is that our 70 million user community connects with each other, really provides a level of sustenance through this extreme pandemic that we've had over the last year, but even for many, many years before that. On top of that, when we look at sort of how people are connecting, they are really sharing stuff that they are bringing from their closet in their home, having a tremendous and deep impact on the environment. And finally, it's creating livelihoods and jobs and economic sustenance for so many people. Our sellers have cumulatively, as we announced beginning of the year, generated over $4 billion of sales and transacted hundreds of millions of items. So that tells you the magnitude of the impact that has been created. So we're very excited for this conversation. And for me, when we think of sustainability, we think of sustainability in all of its dimensions, and it's delightful to see how you are also thinking about sustainability in not just environmental, but environmental, economic, and social terms.
Manish, hi, and thank you again. I'm Kokai, a first year in the full-time MBA program. It's so wonderful to speak with you, especially as a lifelong secondhand enthusiast. This is truly an honor. My first question is actually relevant to something you just mentioned. It's about the business. How do you and the Poshmark team think about sustainability? And do you see sustainability as fundamental to the brand or incidental?
So for us, sustainability is really the core of what we are doing. We think of sustainability in multiple dimensions. When we think of used and secondhand, it really has multiple connotations. Number one, you're preventing something that could go in landfill, that could sit unused. And actually sitting unused is almost as much of a problem, because when it's in use, that means there's more things that are not being manufactured and it being substituted by something you're using. So usage is actually a great thing. And use and reuse. This shirt, I don't know how many times I've used and reused, was bought secondhand on Poshmark. Second thing is, when you're actually buying and selling and transacting, you are really creating a cash flow for the family. And that, particularly in the last year, has really shown how powerful it is. And I can probably not even remember the number of stories we've heard where the impact of this economic thing, in terms of having people who fought homelessness, how people have connected with each other, using Poshmark as a way to create an economic future, has been powerful. Last, but really not the least, is the community and social aspect of secondhand and Poshmark, which is really, when we think of clothing, we think of what we are buying and selling. Clothing is not just an item. It is something that is really very much part of our day-to-day. It's sort of a very important aspect. When you think of food, clothing, and housing, these are like very fundamental things. So clothing really binds the people together. It brings a sense of community. It empowers people. It makes people feel good, proud. It can uplift people. So when we think about all of that, that has been very fundamental to how Poshmark is looking at sustainability too. So we think of sustainability as really, really core to what we are doing.
Hello, my name is Mayan Walsh. I'm a third-year undergraduate in the Environmental Engineering Science program at Berkeley, but who is also extremely interested in sustainable fashion and circular retail systems. So it is such an honor to be able to ask this question. My question is, what are the key challenges to implementing circular retail systems, and what role should Poshmark play in advancing these circular systems?
It's a great question, because it is very much something that we've been thinking about a lot and have been doing a lot of experiments around what is needed to fully enable a circular retail system, not just within Poshmark, but beyond Poshmark. And so when we think of what is needed, we certainly need the core capabilities where you can really take any item, not just buy and sell it on Poshmark, but do it everywhere. So that's sort of, I call it universal access to resale and circular partnership. But that's not enough, because to sustain not just the buying and selling of clothing, but the interest that people have, the excitement that people have, you also have to make sure that these items are not just shared, they are curated, right? So one thing is to think, okay, this is something I don't need. I just put it out there and somebody picks it up. That has some connotation. In Poshmark, for example, when you're listing an item, you create a cover shot. We just recently introduced video, so you can actually add a video. So now suddenly when this item comes alive, it's no longer just an item that you're discarding at the end of life. It is a piece of you. It's a piece of your style. It's something you lovingly did. And that creates not just the fact that you're presenting this item, but people can choose that as a true alternative to retail. And that's why secondhand is the new. It is really where people are focused, and it's creating a revolution driven by all of you, right? You guys are really the future of the world, and you are driving this change, and that's creating demand cycles. The third thing is, I think it needs to be part of the economic future of retail brands as well. And that is a part, I think, where there's going to be a lot of innovation, and how do brands play in the retail future and the economic impact. So when you put all of these three together, the convenience, the curation, and ultimately the monetization, I feel like there's so much to do in circularity in terms of how brands can participate. But also, I'm so excited about all of you, the younger generation, even younger, when you go back to high school and you start to look at kids in elementary school and middle school, how they think about the world is so amazing. And I learn constantly in terms of how attitudes are changing, and that's changing how retail will be done. So I think the future is very, very bright for sustainability.
I'm Lauren Tamor. I'm a second year in the full-time MBA program. And my first question, I think, is building on what you just spoke about, which is that a lot of MBAs and students are thinking about what role we can play and how we can make an impact on sustainability. So my first question is, what kinds of perspectives and voices do you think businesses need more of in the C-suite and boardroom to help accelerate a transition to a sustainable business model?
Thank you, Lauren. I think the first thing to think about any high-level suite, whether it's a boardroom suite or an executive suite, is you need diversity. You need point of views that really challenge the status quo, that bring in different perspectives. You guys need to be part of the board suite or executive suite. So you need to have a voice that is there. I think the second thing is, as you look at sort of what is needed, it's a perspective from not just where the world has been and not just where the world is going, but what the world should go. And to me, that's a very, very different thing than just saying where the trends are, because I think if you look out 3 years, 5 years, or even if you look at today, we went public this year, ThreadUp just went public, and this whole area of resale, I don't think anybody would have thought it would be an industry that would be challenging every single corner of retail. And this is just in one sector, right? So if you step back and go back to 10 years back when we started, we knew we were doing something really unique and special. We knew we were empowering people. We knew we were creating a more sustainable future. But sustainability was not in the vocabulary, right? That was not something that people talked about. Today, I think if you're a brand, if you're a retailer, and you don't have a sustainability section, I think you're sort of out of luck. And so that sea change is driven by the work that all of you are doing and you can do. But that's not enough. I think sustainability is not just about circularity. It's about regeneration. It's about creation. It's about taking stuff that's there and transforming it. So, in terms of each of you, I think there's so much room for innovation, so much room for work that can be done. And if you go back, I grew up in India. If I go back to my early childhood, there was nothing that was wasted. Even newspapers that came were recycled, and people would take them and make new things out of it. So there was literally nothing that was a strand that was wasted. I was talking to actually a professor, and he was talking about when he grew up in India, his grandmother or his mother, who's now the grandmother to his kids, shared the story that saris used to be transacted between villages, where a sari would be kept in a basket. The basket sort of swapper would go to different villages. They would take out a sari, put a new sari in, and give some stuff, because the saris were used in a wedding and they couldn't be reused in that village, so they were circulated to different villages. It was fascinating to see how we think about it was happening, 70 years back or so in villages of India. So I think it's really powerful in terms of adding that diverse point of view, unique point of view, and ultimately, I would say a youthful point of view in terms of where you want the world and society to go.
Hi, Manish. My name is Adam Joseph. I'm a second year in the full-time MBA program. My question for you is, people are clearly expecting the private sector to do more for sustainability, but I want to know what partners are most important for businesses looking to make that change: startups, government, or someone else?
Yeah, I think if you step back and really look at what are the things you can control as a business, that's sort of the first piece. So when we think of any large business or small business, I think partnering with where the innovation is happening is really important. I think partnering with young people like you, schools, Center for Sustainability, I think really where the innovation is happening is going to empower businesses to rethink solutions in a new way. Let's, for example, talk about the simple packaging box that ships items back and forth. Like, that's used by so many companies. How can we reinvent that box at a broad scale, not just benefiting one company, but the entire ecosystem? That's, I think, level of engineering, industrial engineering, and stuff that can happen in labs, that can happen in ecosystems, that can be startups. But in order for it to benefit everything, you also need to partner with the governments, and governments have a very important role to play. When you translate environmental sustainability into social and economic sustainability, that's where I think even, we sit in Silicon Valley, venture capital has a role to play. I have a role to play. You have a role to play as you are doing things. How do we turn every dollar that we make into something that becomes sustainable and propagatable? So for example, at Poshmark, every dollar that's made goes from one person to the other. And in that process creates circularity of even the dollars, not just clothing. And to me, that's really powerful, because what you're doing is giving people journeys to kind of grow and scale. And for us, that has been very core. And it's sometimes gone against the ilk of, where fashion wants to go or where a certain trend wants to go. For us, we want to empower the people. And this was a strategic decision that Tracy Sun, my co-founder, and I made very early on, where different things were coming up. And we said, we don't want to focus on just luxury segment or just mass market segment or just this segment, because people have different things. And we want to really enable all kinds of styles to come together and use the power of technology and data to then serve them up. And I think that is really where I feel the next generation of innovation is going to come from, which is how do you rethink problems from a completely different lens, partner with the right institution to create a new future.
You spoke a bit earlier about how Poshmark has been a second income stream for some people during this last year. And I think that really builds on my next question, which is, how do you think that the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted the circular economy and the resale business model, and what impact will that have going forward?
I think COVID-19 was a seismic shock and a very sad shock for all of us. I think we're still reeling from it. We're isolated. We're sort of not physically connected. And the circular economy and the resale really was, in many ways, a connector. When you bought and sold things from each other, it connected you to another human being. It gave you something that was very powerful, that took energy to do. We saw the rise of secondhand. We saw the rise of handmade. All of these things were outlets of creativity, outlets of transaction. But they were also powered by something much deeper going on, which is the need for economic sustainability. COVID-19, thankfully governments have helped, but despite that, it's been a seismic shock for the economic viability of the country, of people's livelihood. I mean, so many jobs have just disappeared temporarily in the world, some permanently. Businesses have closed. And then the last thing which is there is, when you sort of think about that whole economic impact, is the circularity also allowed us to see how we can live without traditional supply chains, because so much of manufacturing was disrupted. Now, if you step back and think about it from a broader perspective, what is the most important way to be indigenous, to be native to a region? It is to actually participate in circularity, right? And so when you think about that, it is so meaningful for every economy, every society to be able to transact. And that's how the world used to be 100, 150 years back. Today, we can use the power of technology to enable that at a grand scale. So my belief is that circularity and resale really became an asset to society as we transformed, and people saw the power of it in COVID-19 more than anything else.
Thanks for that, Manish. Hello again. A question now about something you mentioned earlier with regard to just the explosive disruption of resale in the retail industry. With that in mind, how do you think about differentiating Poshmark from other resale sites? How do you envision continuing to evolve and differentiate the brand as more companies enter the space?
So we think of ourselves as a social marketplace where social, which is powered by technology, really leads the way. We start by creating an asset-light model. So we don't touch inventory, which allows us to remove any centralization and allows a lot of flexibility in our marketplace. So when COVID-19 came in and started to push us back indoors, and ultimately we realized that this thing isn't just a 1 day, 1 week, 1 day phenomenon. Now we've been in it for a year. People transformed their fashion and lifestyle. Suddenly, Zoom fashion became a thing. People started to live in sweats and sneakers. And our marketplace, because of its asset-light model, could quickly transform and become that. The second thing that we have is the power of community. So Poshmark really provides this deep connection. For example, we have videos. You can not only share your listings with videos, you can also tell a personal story. People talk to each other. You might see comments on Poshmark where somebody might say, "Hey, Jenny, I'm here today, but and I love this dress. Can you share some details about the dress? And oh, by the way, how's your daughter doing?" Right? And so we have live Posh parties, virtual Posh parties that allows people to remain in this very community social architecture, which we believe allows people to remain engaged for a long period of time. Ultimately, the heart of Poshmark is community and data and technology. So we invest a lot in our data and technology that powers everything, allowing that scale to be available to everyone. So when we think of our platform, we think of bringing the human connection of shopping into this online e-commerce distributed world. And the ultimate thing for us is the simplicity of our model allows everyone to participate in it. You can be a 16-year-old kid and you can be a 70-year-old grandfather, and you can both participate in this economy and find your tribe. And the tribe may be surprisingly different than what you might think. And for example, you might not realize the kind of clothing variety I've tried on Poshmark. I'm sitting here. This is a specific shirt from an indie brand in LA, but I can also shop Korean streetwear on Poshmark. So you sort of have this diversity powered by technology. So when you think of Poshmark over the long term, we think of it as really enabling the human experience online and bringing people from all varieties together and ultimately powering circularity in a very unique way.
Building on this idea of community on Poshmark, does a focus on sustainability help to humanize the online retail experience? And how do you think introducing social elements to user experience enhances sustainability specifically?
I think the sustainability and human connection is such a powerful connection. If you're just buying a shirt and shirt is new or used, it's one thing. And certainly you can look at it and you can say, okay, this is a used shirt. I have certain feelings towards used products. I can buy it. But if I'm buying a shirt from you and you tell me a little bit about the shirt or you share a little bit of the history, it suddenly changes everything. And I can't tell you how many packages come in my mail where people write a personal note sharing a little bit of the history of the jacket or sort of how it affects their lives. So that part, I think, not just engages you with the product, but engages you with the story of the product. It's almost an artisanal feel sometimes to a mass-produced product. And that allows secondhand to actually be even better than firsthand, right? It's not just about that it's as good, it's actually better. Because where would you get a shirt is a shirt, right? But where would you get a shirt with a story bought from someone who you can connect with and buy again and again from or sell to? So that, I think, is really the power of community. The other power of community is if you think about our platform, but just in general, we have 45% of our sales are apparel. And in general, you can sell an item on Poshmark, it goes to the buyer, unless there's a defect, buyer keeps it, right? And we have amazing cohorts, amazing sort of ecosystem. And the reason it's powered is because of the conversations that happen prior to the transaction. And that prevents a lot of wastage back and forth that happens in traditional retail because you can have that human connection. So having that person attached to a product, which is how retail used to be 50, 70 years back, resale and community enables it at a massive scale that has never been seen before.
Hello again. My next question is, what other apparel or retail industry stakeholders do you see as sustainability leaders, and how do they influence your own sustainability programs?
Yeah, there's just amazing work happening. I think I'll highlight a couple, but there is so many people who are innovating in so many different ways that it's exciting to see how everyone is jumping into this fray. So even big brands are certainly participating in it. When I think of Levi's as one of the brands that has created a secondhand pair of jeans, because jeans in many ways don't age, right? We can keep wearing them and they actually transform. They don't age. A well-worn jean is a beautiful pair of jeans. In fact, there's trends, for a long time where we actually destroy a jean to make it look like worn so that we can wear it first time, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. Patagonia, right? I would say what I like about brands and people, if they're truly authentic to what they are doing, I love them. And I feel like Patagonia is authentic. The products they make are sustainable. The products are reusable. In fact, in the middle of COVID, vintage Patagonia had its moment where suddenly these jackets, which could not even be sold for $15 or $20, were suddenly going for $200 because they just had this amazing connection. I don't know if you guys caught into that, but it was a very powerful moment where we were looking at all these jackets and suddenly they shot up in prices because they were so rare and people wanted to just buy off each other. In fact, I have a Patagonia jacket that I bought and somebody searched through my purchases and made me an offer through the comments saying, I'll buy it. Of course, I was not selling it. It was an amazing jacket. I still wear it. But that's sort of the amazingness that brand brings. And then, in terms of just the hot leaders, there are so many. I think of the young woman, Greta, who just is such a powerful voice in sustainability and has shaken the world and even taken on governments and presidents. I feel like that's the kind of power I see. And for me personally, thinking about influence of brands, I look at my nephews and nieces. My kids are too old, but when I talk to my 11-year-old niece, I learned so much about the world where it should be and sustainability. So every time I talk to her, I'm educated. I'm missing my conversations with her as this COVID has happened. So I really think that the world is moving in this direction. Everyone's forced to move in this direction. My hope is that we are authentic as we move and not just sort of at another marketing gimmick and let's just do it and then move on.
Well, Manish, you've heard from our wonderful students, and now I have the opportunity to chime in. And I'm Robert Strand, and I have the great privilege to be the executive director of the Center for
Thank you for having me here, Robert.
Oh, we're so grateful. I should, hopefully my dean need cover your ears here, but I'm getting paid. This is my job. And I get to have this conversation with you. And I don't know who in their right mind pays me to get to do this, but I feel so fortunate to be able to do so. And Manish, we've been so looking forward to this conversation. So thank you off the bat here for engaging as you are. And I have a few more questions that we fielded from students. And I'd like to start, if I could, use this opportunity to pose a question myself here. And just a little bit of setup. My other name that I go by is Mr. Nordic. A good colleague and friend, Barbara Osher, gave me that nickname, and it's because I've been inspired by the Nordic region. I've had the opportunity to live there, and in fact, that for me was the first time that I experienced a norm of secondhand clothes. And all the clothes I'm wearing here, it wasn't because of today. It's just because these are always the clothes I wear. They were purchased in Copenhagen at a Lopa market, flea markets. It's just the norm for secondhand clothes. So you buy good quality apparel and then you keep it in circulation. And so I'm very interested in how we can be inspired to think differently. And for me, the Nordics have done that for me, where I look differently at the world. And I also had the privilege to be on the faculty and teach sustainable capitalism in the Nordics classes. And if I could use that as a segue, because I think Poshmark, you can help us to think differently about this broad concept of capitalism. So if I could, just to start at this high level, I'd just love to hear your reflections, Manish, state of affairs of American capitalism, concerns, opportunities you might have, and I'd like to draw that to the conversations about sustainability and Poshmark also. But just to start with that broad framing, how do you see it? How do you see the state of affairs right now of American capitalism and what we could or should be doing with respect to that?
I think we're at a very powerful moment in our history, and COVID-19 has accelerated the realization of this moment, which is a lot of systems and a lot of mindsets have been changed. And as we come out of our hiding places, as we come out of our holes, and the world reintegrates over the next few months, which I'm hoping that it continues, although it was positive, and then as with COVID, there's something negative, but let's say it happens. I feel like everyone is looking at their life, as looking at their values in a very different way. And as we go out and truly experience both the wonder of human connection and the misery that people have had, I think it's a real important time to transform how we think about capitalism, how we think about consumption, and how we think about sustainability. I am pro-consumption, I'm pro-capitalism, but I'm also pro-sustainability. I think all three things can coexist in a meaningful way and allow us to have a better future. If you think of our economy, right, we've gone from a heavy manufacturing economy to a heavy service economy. Well, circularity is service, because you're not making products, you're actually transforming products. We've gone from, in this last year, we've gone from a mass manufacturing economy to an artisanal economy. People are buying small breads and chocolates. People are buying clothing. That is a very native economy. We are buying things from each other. That is very sustainable economy. So if we combine these forces and continue to empower them at a massive scale, it gives us a lot of joy. We use Airbnbs. We sort of visit each other's places. We go and connect at the human level. I think that connection in this moment is really a very seminal moment in the history of capitalism in general, but I think American capitalism in particular.
And Manish, something that I hear you say consistently, and it relates to Poshmark, and I hear it over and over again, you talk about connection, you talk about community. And it strikes me, and you made the mention 50, 70 years ago, this was how business was done. It was more personal. And I'd take us back even further when we go to the origins of what we call capitalism. And Adam Smith, 1776, Wealth of Nations. And when he talked about that baker, butcher, and brewer who produces his goods, not just to feed a community, but to feed his own family, that baker, butcher, brewer, that was a person who was engaged and was part of their community. And it seems like Poshmark, you and your business model, you're kind of helping us realize that again.
Truly, that's our vision. Our vision is really to empower everyone to really exercise their true powerful self. And when we think about that, it can be a single self or it can be multiple selves, right? So what we do is we empower you to create and sell. Create in the sense that you're curating what you have, you're curating what you can get from your neighborhoods, from your supply chain, and building it, but also selling it, which creates the economic engine, very similar to what you're talking about, going back to the old village system. But it's also a transformation time where it isn't just about creating physical goods. People are creating intellectual capital. People have become teachers. People have become connectors. And so when we think of this decade, I think of it as the creator economy, and creator in all forms of the world. And I think, as I'm looking at your students, I'm sure many of the students are probably engaged in some level of creator economy in their personal lives, professional lives, in terms of empowering it. And technology is a force of good from that perspective, where suddenly it has allowed us to connect to a lot of people and create that. So I really think it's, again, a very magical moment from that perspective, if we think about it right? If we think about it from all of the other perspectives that are happening, our ideologies are divided. We're divided by different places. We are trying to come together. And I think economic forces can actually bring us again together and create a more unified society as we move forward. So it's a really, really powerful thing. And I completely agree with you. Going back to a small village, we can now create many small villages, except they are connected by distributed technology. But a person in that village could be in New York, another person could be in Cal and Berkeley, another person could be in Cincinnati, Ohio, and they could be connected and be part of that same village today.
And it seems like, there's a beautiful story there, and it's a story that's more nuanced. It's not a narrative of we need to go back to some life that used to be, but it's a story of what do we value in the human experience. And just because family and community has been around forever doesn't mean that it's obsolete. Let's double down on that. And how do we leverage technology in service of society and not the other way around? And I hear so many elements of that very thoughtful positioning within this broad concept of how we live in a society and how does capitalism work and where Poshmark fits within there. And if I could, I'll use that to pivot into a student question here, because of course, capitalism is a broad concept, relies upon markets, but markets aren't, it's not like gravity. It's not a natural act. They're constructions and they require policies. And so one of the questions that I really am drawn to here that our students asked is what kind of policies or regulation does Poshmark advocate for within its industry, if any, and why?
So I think first thing that we have advocated from day one and actually continue to build our business is that every business that's part of Poshmark, everyone who's creating something that's part of Poshmark, behaves very responsibly to their local society. If you think of somebody who's opened up their closet for business, it's kind of opening up a neighborhood store, except your neighborhood is now the whole country. So I'll tell you a funny story. When we started the company, I went to the state government in California and applied for a sales tax permit to pay sales tax. I said, every seller in Poshmark should pay sales tax. It's just logical. For 2 years, they refused to give us a sales tax permit. And this is before the Wayfair ruling, before everything else, because there was no mechanisms in place. And to me, it was didn't make any sense, because I wanted everyone to be a first-class seller where they are selling and supporting the local economy. And as we saw in COVID, that post-Wayfair ruling, when everything shifted online, can you imagine the local governments if there was no online sales tax, how devastating it would have been for every state economy? And because of the Wayfair ruling and because of sort of what happened in the adaptation, states had a bonanza in terms of what they were doing, because so much of the transactions were above board. Sales tax were clean and paid, and it sort of was there. So and the movement of goods and the transaction and the recording of the goods was so powerful across the state lines, and it was fairly allocated. So when we think of policies, we think of policies that are clean, that are fair, that protect the consumer, and they protect the government. Certain cases, the policies are really powerful. So like in case of sales tax, certain cases, it can be really challenging. So for example, we just joined the PASS initiative, and there is a movement for sellers to disclose excessive information online, which is almost the antithesis of privacy. And we have taken a stand to say that while the intent of that movement is correct, it'll actually disempower the consumer and really favor the larger sector. So there are movements that happen where, I call them good intentions, bad outcomes. And that happens a lot of times with policy. So there we may take a stand against a policy. There is, the usage, when we start to think of usage of materials, usage of goods, those are areas that we want to be really big advocates for the consumer and for the platform and for the people, because we feel that there's a lot of progress that can be made. But the thing I want to sort of talk about that, Robert, in relationship that many things can be done with policy, but deeper changes can happen when we appeal to the core behaviors that define human nature. So our first value at Poshmark is really lead with love and money follows, right? And that is something that, people thought after 2 years they'll give up, after 3 years they'll give up. Once they become a big corporate, they'll give up. But it's something that's so endemic and it's built into our platform. For example, we're one of the rare platforms where every seller is incented to promote every other seller. Where would you find a platform where every seller is actually actively promoting other sellers? And that's part of the ecosystem. So you have to build principles where it is profitable to be sustainable. It's profitable to be loving and community oriented. So blending these things requires fundamental mind shifts. And that's, I think, what I hope for the future.
And I really, that the lead with love and this idea of purpose as a driver and an outcome of a well-run, purpose-driven company. An outcome is profitability, and not its purpose. And an expression comes to mind that I heard first from Ed Freeman, who's a professor, the stakeholder theorist, and this gets to ideas of stakeholder capitalism. And he said that effectively along the lines of, purpose is to the company a lot like oxygen is to the body. It's necessary for survival, but it's a pretty lousy thing to live for. They don't jump out of bed in the morning, oh, fulfilled my purpose. No, but if you have a purpose-filled life, you're more likely to breathe more oxygen in your life, just like a purpose-filled company is more likely to realize more profits. And I'm drawn to that. And I'll also say I can speak on behalf of our wonderful students here because I've had the privilege to engage with them in ongoing conversations. Those are the kinds of organizations that they want to work with. They want to start these kind of companies. They want to join these sorts of companies. These are flourishing organizations. And if I could just to use that, because there's such deep-seated cultural dimensions and that you're offering here, Manish, and can't help but ask, could you tie and discuss your experiences at Berkeley Haas and how those have informed your view and how you approach your work at Poshmark?
Haas is, for me, one of my most transformational experiences, particularly because it happened after I'd worked for several years and I was looking for really finding that next level of growth for me. There's so many stories I can tell you in terms of Haas that I personally had, but the two that stands in mind is a class in macroeconomics where I had the most amazing professor who brought macroeconomics to life. And one of his best analogies was, he said, let me give you macroeconomics. When you're making, and we're going back, I'm revealing my age, but we're going back into the 90s when I was taking my MBA program here. So the dollars are in that sense. He said, when you're making $30,000 a year, your teeth look just fine. When you start to make 50 or 60, they look slightly crooked. At 100, they're horrible. We need to get orthodontia. That's macroeconomics for you. How in so many ways, different things get transformed. So Haas to me is really bringing real world to life, giving us insight that allows us to apply that in meaningful ways, in different ways. And I think even this is an example of the innovation that all of you are doing at Haas that I'm so proud of.
Absolutely fantastic. And we see ourselves at Haas, and I think it's more than just seeing. I think we are this. We're a platform to question the status quo of business, to question the status quo of American capitalism. And we have this really unique place because we are a mainstream top business school. It's also part of this progressive institution that is the University of California, Berkeley. And Manish, I know that you have your ties with Berkeley your own degree and your family has strong connections with the University of California, Berkeley. And I would just be interested to hear your offerings on what does Berkeley mean to you?
So Berkeley is actually the city I met my wife. So that's what Berkeley means to me. I was working and staying in Berkeley. This was actually before I even went to Haas. I'd moved to Berkeley because I felt very connected to that town. And even though I don't have any hair now, at that time I used to have a ponytail. And fortunately, I met my wife after I chopped off my ponytail, because she said, if you had a ponytail, I would have never married you. So that is my connection to Berkeley, but also my connection to Berkeley is all the amazing food, going in and having amazing coffees, eating at different places, and of course, seeing very, very, very amazing characters when you walk around in Berkeley, which are very memorable, both for their visual size and sometimes for their aroma. So Berkeley is just this potpourri of experiences that I don't think anybody can forget about.
Well, I heard someone once say that if you're bored of Berkeley, you're bored of life. And it strikes me that's the case. Now, I think I might be with your wife, though, with respect to the ponytail. You look lovely today, Manish. I'm sure it worked for you at the time here, but I think that the direction you've chosen to go with your style is definitely, I'll applaud it. And if I could actually it reminds me here, and some of the questions that students have asked, it relates to this idea of style. Because we hear of fashion and we hear of fast fashion. And there's this thing of style. And it seems that Poshmark is hitting at that style side of things that actually then, because folks we like to wear clothes. We don't want to wear burlap bags. We want to express ourselves. We have a style. There's something there. But folks oftentimes think that fashion is antithetical to sustainability because they think of this fast. Could you talk a little bit about style and what that means at Poshmark, and maybe related to this idea of sustainability?
Absolutely. So talking about our core values, another one of our core values is embrace your weirdness. And that is really about understanding that each of us is not only unique, but each of us also feels like a misfit in the world. So you could see the most well-adjusted person from outside and think, oh my God, he or she is just amazing. Like they know they've got their life figured out. You go inside their mind and you're like, where have I landed? And so if you recognize that everyone is feeling that way and everyone is sort of trying to fit in, then you can actually accept everyone. And it's really a call to accept everyone's uniqueness so you can embrace it, because you're embracing the fact that you are also unique and in a way, a misfit in the world. And that goes to the concept of style. Like a style is really a way for you to express yourself. And a lot of times people don't feel confident. They feel like, okay, if I wear this, I'll be laughed at. And by the way, my kids have laughed at my style so many times. So no worries. Sometimes my daughter will say, I'm not walking out with you because this is my tamer style. And, after a while, once you embrace it, you sort of say, I'm weird, then it's fine. Then you can be yourself, which is not to say you be antisocial or be in any way negative. It doesn't give you the license to be a pariah, but it does give you a license to be yourself a little bit more and embrace it. And when you think about that whole area, you think about this shirt with maybe a red pair of pants, maybe with a purple hat, right? If you can combine these things and create style, then really everything becomes sustainable because nothing is odd anymore. And we've seen that in the history of fashion. Things go out of style, things come back in style. Sometimes there's a stitch here, sometimes there's a stitch there. Right now, we're sort of in the place where we are going back to, hippies movement, tie-dyed, back into 60s and 70s style. Skinny's not in, it's more like baggy and all of that. So if we preserve those items, and you can probably find them in maybe not in your mom's closet, maybe your grandfather's closet, take them out, reuse them, repurpose them. And that, to me, is embracing your weirdness to create something where we can all be ourselves and create a more sustainable and in some ways a more just society.
And there's something so powerful there, Manish, that you've managed to connect to a business model that I find so inspiring. And it connects very much with Berkeley Haas and our defining leadership principles. particular confidence without attitude. And I like that expression of none of us really know what we're doing. We're just trying our best and we're kind of bumbling along. And folks may have the appearance of just kind of having everything all buttoned up, but go inside of any of our minds and we're all insecure. And some of us try to veil that insecurity with overconfidence, and we can see where that goes so negatively. I've never heard a company talk about that kind of square on as part of who it is as a business. I love that.
And for us, it's not just a part of our company, it's part of our customer base as well. So in Poshmark, as a platform, the key is that we really embrace different styles and different point of views. That allows the platform to never look down on anybody, the community to never look down on anybody. Because you could be wearing a $5 top or you could be wearing a $2,000 handbag. From a broader perspective, it gives everyone that same amount of joy and brings that delight. And we should respect that and we should embrace it and allow people to thrive. And over time, that has allowed a massive cross-pollination. We do this once a year conference called PoshFest, where people fly in from across the country. And as we opened up global markets before everything shut down, we had countries and people flying from other countries. And you see these people, intergenerational, different diversity, different backgrounds, coming in and giving each other a big hug. Sometimes they've never met each other. They've only met on Poshmark, and they form lifelong friendships. You'll find interesting people paired up that you would say, why are these two people paired up together? You'll see multi-generational. We've had mother, daughter, grandmother all coming together from different parts of the country and attending PoshFest because they're posh together. So to me, I think this thing is a very unifying theme in some ways. When we think about red and blue, we think about left and right. If we can embrace each other's weirdness and really accept it, it leads to a much more joyful future.
And I think your point there is a very good one. As far as we have some obvious divides here in the United States, you're talking about crossing, bringing folks together. And I would also suggest that your core business model, this idea of conservation cuts across all lines, and that should be a theme. And it fits so much with sustainability, of course. We should leverage and recognize where we have words and ideas that can bring us together also. And I see you as obviously conservation. And it reminds me of an expression I heard once. Your story from earlier in your life, it reminded me of something I heard in Sweden. And I could have heard it from my grandmother or folks from prior generations, particularly those who lived through the Great Depression. And that is, waste is what is left when your imagination runs out. I really am drawn to that idea. How do we spark on? And you are the innovative outcome of that sort of mindset. And if I could hear another student question to put in it, because we only have a few minutes left, and I want to make sure to see a student question with respect to waste and concerns. One of our fine Berkeley Haas students says packaging remains a significant pain point for online apparel. So what are Poshmark's hopes for the future in that space?
I talked about it earlier. I hope that we can create, particularly in the circular economy, packaging that is not just disposed of, but packaging that sustains and lives for a long time. Kind of like a water bottle. Instead of throwing away every water bottle, we reuse it and reuse it and reuse it, and it becomes almost a brand. Like I'm opening a box and it's sustainable. So to me, it's very much about rethinking. As you said, I think I love, by the way, what you just said. Waste is something that is left when your imagination runs out, and I embrace that. I'm going to use that. It's something I love it. But I also think that in some ways, when you take the old ideas, which is you're transporting things, and you blend it with new ideas that your students have, that people have, to me, that's fusion, and that fusion can really transform the world. One of the things I would love to do, you've been asking me questions. I would love to take hours and ask your students many questions because I have so much to learn from them. And so to me, every interaction is not just about, what you teach. It's also every teaching is a huge learning opportunity and growth opportunity. And so to me, I think that's a way of not just waste, but rejuvenating. Even as an old man, you can always rejuvenate yourself and become young again by interacting with amazing young people who are fertile.
Well, it's fantastic, Manish. And you just nailed another one of our Haas defining principles, and that's student always. And with that student always, there's a humility that comes with that, coupled with a curiosity. And that's what we find with our students is this incredible humility and curiosity, and also a heart that desires to change and a really strong brain to be able to execute. We only have just under 5 minutes left. And Manish, I'd like if we could turn attention toward the future here. And could you paint a picture for us, Poshmark in the future, 5-10 years? What does it look like?
To me, when I think of 5 or 10 years, I think of Poshmark as really a unified community. That's not just unifying the country, but it's really cutting across the boundaries of multiple countries. I can see a woman in Kenya making, buying, selling a dress to a woman in New York. And through that economic interaction, the woman in Kenya can now pay for food for her family. The woman in New York then transforms that and sends it forward. And from there, she can really get appreciation of our global culture that's happening. So when you start to connect this world in different ways, it powers creativity, it powers transactions, and ultimately it powers sustainability, because what's going here can actually come back. And it's possible that another woman in Kenya can buy that item from that woman in New York. And that would be a beautiful story completed. And that could be used in that woman's daughter's wedding. And so now this garment has gone from Kenya to New York and all the way back, and really is becoming a meaningful part of the world. And hopefully Poshmark is there just helping along this amazing sort of story of economic empowerment, of social connection, and ultimately of sustainable future.
Manish, it's just a beautiful way to come to a close with this event. And it's a testament to you as a person and the folks at your wonderful organization, Poshmark. And I have to say, we're so proud of you. We are so proud that you are our alum and that we're in your universe. And we are so proud of our students here. And so being able to bring these universes together today is just it's a privilege and just such a joy that I could play some role here and take part in this. With that, then, on behalf of Dean Harrison and the entire Berkeley Haas community, the Dean's Speaker Series, and the Center for Responsible Business Rudolph Peterson Speaker Series, this brings our event to a close, where we have had such a fantastic opportunity to talk with you, Manish, to talk with our wonderful students, and engage in such vitally important discussions. We covered capitalism, we covered the future of Poshmark, we covered a lot of ground in between. And so with that, we bring the event to a close and say thank you so very much. And a fond farewell to you all.
Thank you for having me, and thank you all for spending your time with me. Thanks.
Thank you, Manish.